Greetings. We bring to you the new Pan-African show called AFREEQA with your host Katsalaurk Sefu. Today we're going to focus on African History Month, since the month of February was given to us to celebrate our history. And I do have a great guest for you, and I am going to turn it to him so he can introduce himself. Welcome.
Well, my name is Timothy Green. I'm also known as the poet MC I Timothy, and some people call me other things, but that's another story.
Let me say welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is a great idea, Pan African AfREEQA. I like that too.
Thank you.
With free in the middle.
Yes.
That's cool.
So we're going to go straight to the questions. How do you explain to an Ethiopian American or a Ghanaian American what it means to be an African American? Because there might be a place where they might gain genuine knowledge about it in America unless they go looking for it.
Well, that's a very good question. I often tell my African brothers and sisters here on the continent that they should speak with African Americans before they go to America. And don't avoid us when you go to America. I know a lot of Africans are taught, don't go near those African Americans, they're thugs, they're criminals, but that's not all of our history. Many of us were forced into the underworld, and because of segregation and oppression, we didn't get the opportunities. And people who were brilliant tacticians or entrepreneurs, or sometimes the only outlet they found was in the underworld. And so that's why many of them became, known for that. But that's not the full and the only part of our experience in America. So that's just one part, small part. But it has its perspective, and people should really know the history of why some black people turn to crime. Not all, because many are hardworking and law-abiding and all of those things. So it's not a blanket thing you can say all African Americans are this or they're that, no matter what the media tries to portray.
Yeah, we've learned about the media.
I'm glad that people are seeing that.
Exactly.
Because a lot of times, especially here on the continent, what they saw on TV was gospel. Yeah. That's even another reason why I trained in television and radio and those forms of the media, to be able to get the truth in those mediums, because it's possible. You can tell the truth on those mediums.
Very true. When did you decide to leave America, and why did you choose Ethiopia?
I was talking about this with a friend of mine last night. I began thinking about leaving America right after I finished college. Okay. Around 1978, 79 was when I started thinking that I wanted to leave the United States. It wasn't until, like I said, around 80, 81 when I got introduced to Rastafari and the movement that I began to see Africa, and specifically Ethiopia, as a real destination. Because that was when I learned that the 12 tribes of Israel had actually sent people, the Ethiopian World Federation had been given land. All of these things were new to us. We didn't get this history in America. So that piqued my curiosity, and I felt like, if I was going to leave the US, Africa is as good a place as any. So I visited West Africa in about 1982, and that experience taught me how, when you come to Africa, you have to be organized. You should have some skills to present and share with the people. So when I moved back to Los Angeles, that's when I focused on radio, television, film, training myself to become an expert in all of those areas so that I could bring that expertise to Ethiopia and share.
Beautiful. Well, I myself is a returnee after 20 years in the United States. And while you also came back after 400 years, if you could say that. So how's life in Addis for an African American diaspora? And if you had a chance to change anything, what would that one thing be?
Wow. Well, I love Ethiopia, like Addis Ababa, the new flower, and it's like a new chapter of my life. Again, like I said, I trained myself in radio, television, and film and those things in Los Angeles, but I didn't get a chance to work exclusively in those areas. So I had small jobs and college films that I did, and I did public radio, and I did things like that. But as far as making a career and a living out of it, that didn't happen until I came to Ethiopia. So for me, it's like, you know, a new phase. Plus, when we come here, it's 7 years behind, so I lose 7 years off the, I'm 7 years younger.
It's a good way of seeing it.
All of those things make me love Ethiopia. Some of the things I wish, again, it's not a regret, but I just wish, and again, it's part of my educational process, is to let the people know, you know, African Americans, many of us are on the low part of the totem pole in America. We don't come here with a money tree or pockets, bags full of money. And just because I come from America does not mean I am a proponent or I uphold the American system. I do not. So I want people to be clear on that. I left America for a specific reason.
Right.
And, you know, if people ask me, I'll share it.
Okay. That's nice. How come African Americans come up with such fantastic music?
You know, I think all Africans come up with fantastic music, but the African American experience is unique because, you know, just like they say, pressure creates diamonds. You know, the pressure of oppression and segregation and lynching and all of these things that, you know, second-class citizens calling grown men boy. Those things lead to wanting to express yourself in a deeper way. So blues, jazz, and all of the resulting genres that stem from those. Rock and roll, rhythm and blues, hip hop.
Go on.
We can keep going, but all of those have their roots in the expressions, the gospel music, that the slave chants and the hollers that we used to sing in the fields. All of those, it comes from the same place. Deep down in our soul. That's why they say it's soul music. Soul music. You know, no matter what the particular genres, blues is soul music, jazz is soul music, hip hop is soul music, especially because they utilize a lot of those blues and rock and R&B and funk and jazz loops to make their art. So to me, it's building on what other generations have done. And it all comes from inside. We are big proponents of expressing deep down what's inside when you have that opportunity, because in so many areas of society we didn't get the opportunity to express ourselves fully, so it came out in the music.
So, as a conscious African man in America, did you have any issues with the police? Can you educate us about the criminal justice system as it currently stands in America?
Ooh, I personally didn't have a lot of experience with it. I mean, every black man in America has, you know, you feel when the police pull you over on a simple traffic stop, you have to keep your hands where they can see them. You have to speak very calmly and eloquently in a calm voice. And, you know, we had that training, all of us, because we knew that, you know, a false move and you could be dead in your car. And they would just throw some crack or something in there and say, yeah, or throw a weapon on you. Or they did those things. So the criminal justice system in America, a lot of people don't know, but the first police were the slave patrols, the ones who went out to catch runaway slaves. Those were the people that were deputized by local authorities to go and return property that had run away. And so that was the first patty rollers, that's what they used to call them, the patrol. And that's where the idea of policing first came. And then after the emancipation, when you had so many free black people, and we outnumbered white people in a lot of the states in America, then they used the 14th Amendment against us. Because if you left the plantation looking for work, but there was no work, they would arrest you for vagrancy. So now you've got a criminal record. And then now you can't get another job. So every town you go to, oh, he's a vagrant, he's a criminal, he's already been arrested, he's got a criminal record. Again, that's why many African Americans feel they don't have any recourse but to go in the underground, to the underworld and the criminal element, because a lot of them get pushed in that direction and they don't get an opportunity to be part of the normal society. even when Reconstruction, post-Civil War and emancipation, there were more black senators and representatives and mayors and governors, but there were also white vigilante mobs who would go and destroy whole towns, lynch these leading figures, and put the fear of God into the black people that followed them. They used to hang the sign, this nigga tried to vote, this nigga tried to do this, he tried it, and they'd hang him on a tree and make him an example. So all of these things conditioned Black America for over the years that we don't trust the authority. We cannot trust the law because it's never been for us. It's always been against us. It's always been utilized. And then even in modern times, that the Black Panther Party was formed in Oakland to combat police brutality. And they started out as a police watch group. They would legally observe an arrest in progress, and they themselves would be armed legally according to the laws in California. But that scared them so much that they started to try to put laws on the books to deny African Americans the right to bear arms, even though that's, the Second Amendment of the United States. So, a lot of the things that we see about America is very hypocritical. And so the justice system is just part of all of that hypocrisy.
That's very true. So now we go into your teaching experience. I want you to tell us a little about your experience in Addis, and if there are any major differences between the youth here in Ethiopia and the youth in America.
Good question. When I was in America, I used to visit schools, but I wasn't a teacher.
Okay.
Coming to Ethiopia and seeing the need for English teachers, and because my minor is English literature, I've been fortunate enough to teach here in Ethiopia. And one of the things I find that's true with children everywhere is that they're intensely curious. Children are always curious, and they want to know about the next thing, about you, about where you come from, what your background is. They're curious. Sometimes they'll approach you with questions, sometimes they won't. But children are like that all over. Here in Ethiopia, I find that the children are a little bit more respectful. When you enter a class and they all stand up, that's a new experience for us. In America, they don't do that. When the teacher comes in, everybody, or the teacher's already there and you just come in and you sit down in class. And so it's not the same. It's not the same. But at the same time, there are similarities because children are children everywhere.
True.
Yeah.
In what ways do you implement your youth development and empowerment initiatives in Addis?
My personal mission, again, to share the African American experience. So that includes music and poetry. So I try to expose the Ethiopian children to Langston Hughes and Maya Angelou and Nikki Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez and poets, Tupac Shakur, even, just poets who express themselves and who were able to express similar feelings, because all people have the same feelings.
Right.
So I think those Black American poets really express our reality, more so than, Shakespeare or Elizabeth Barrett Browning. No disrespect to their art, but, again, it's not ours. Paul Laurence Dunbar, these poets are poets who I grew up on, and I always feel like I want to share the things that made me want to read. Reading Langston Hughes made me want to read. Reading Maya Angelou made me want to read more. So I think that once students become interested in great artists and they're Black like us, that, it inspires you more, that you want to learn more about them. So that's always been my experience. So I feel like I just throw out different artists just to, hopefully they'll catch. Stevie Wonder, Sly Stone. These are poets, even though they're in the music realm. Curtis Mayfield. These are artists that a lot of Ethiopians don't know about and they don't listen to. And again, nothing against Michael Bolton and Celine Dion, but when I first came to Ethiopia, I said, hey, they need to hear real soul music, not the Pretenders to sing about. So, you know, and again, no disrespect to Michael Bolton or Celine Dion. They're very good at what they do. But what they do is largely mimic black music. So let's get the real thing. Hear Percy Sledge, When a Man Loves a Woman. And tell me that that's better than Michael Bolton. Because I believe it is. You know what I'm saying? Listen to Aretha Franklin or Patti LaBelle and tell me if those women aren't amazing singers, just like Celine Dion. Even better. Whitney Houston. I mean, these are amazing artists. So I think that, you know, the Ethiopians should be in connection with the black artists because we're connected to Ethiopia. True. And Ethiopians are connected to us. So, you know, that's a part of my mission is to just share all of this culture that we have because we've got a rich culture too. And I love the Ethiopian culture, but I think that we have a lot of things in common. As we were talking about before, a lot of African Americans have come to Ethiopia long before even the Jamaicans started coming. We were coming here, like from Menelik's days. One of the first men who came here was a man named William Ellis, Guillermo Ellisano, because when he was living in America, he couldn't do the things he wanted to, so he pretended to be a Mexican. He was born in Texas. He could speak Spanish. He was light-skinned. So he just changed his name and invested in the stock market and opened banks, and he became a millionaire. And then he came to Ethiopia, he wanted to open a bank. But
things didn't work out.
Yeah, people in the State Department and U.S. government didn't really want a black man to be at point of a bank in Ethiopia. So
back then too.
Yeah, this was, you know, like Menelik's time. Everybody was trying to get influence after Menelik defeated Italy in the Battle of Adwa. Everybody was sending representatives to Ethiopia. There's a lot of people don't understand that either. Like during Menelik's time, he received ambassadors from Russia, from France, from all over the world. They came with gifts to Menelik trying to get some concessions or something because, okay, we're not going to do it by war, so we better come and
peace.
Kiss up to him and be nice and try to, and then try to get in that way. So that's how the French were able to build it, the railway and how telegraph and telephones and those things were introduced in Ethiopia during Menelik's time because of all of the foreigners who came to help Ethiopia at that time. So William Ellis was one, but they didn't allow him to open up a bank that would connect African Americans and Ethiopians. Again, so nothing new.
There.
Nothing new.
What unique talents as an African American teacher do you bring to the table? In other words, what kind of kids are you trying to develop?
Ooh. You know, again, like my thing with the poetry is, for me, it helped me to express myself, to be open to other people's feelings and expressions. So I think that's one thing that poetry does for humanity. It opens you up to what other people think and feel. If it touches you in a way, then it kind of puts you in touch with that other person. So exposing the children here in Ethiopia to poets who are from Jamaica, from South America, from Central America, from African America, Black America, Canada, all of these places gives them, and even Africa, the continent, because there's very good poets and writers in West Africa and South Africa, and even here in Ethiopia. You know, I encourage them, not just the English poets, but explore your own Ethiopian poets and artists, Zara Yacob and Yared, the musical saint. So all of these things is history of Ethiopia, but these are people who express themselves here. You know, and at the time, people thought they were crazy or said, look, that man, he's talking to the birds, but he was coming up with chants and songs that they sing today, listening to the birds. So, you know, come on, you got to listen to other people. Sometimes people hear, that's the George Washington Carver, he would be out listening to the plants. And he discovered so many things about plants, just sitting in the field and listening to them. So you can't say that man is crazy. He discovered so many things from the peanut, from the soybean, by listening to the plant. So, you know, again, I might not want to sit and listen to a plant, but there was somebody that did, and he did a lot of great things. So I don't diss it. Exactly. You know what I'm saying? It's not what I might do, but it's what he did.
That's the
Everybody
thing.
has their own thing.
Yeah. Not to diss each other, just appreciate and be thankful for
You don't have to agree with everyone, but you don't have to, it doesn't mean that you have to be an enemy because you don't agree. that's one of the things I try to instill that in especially the younger generation. Just because you don't agree with somebody doesn't mean they have to be your enemy. You don't have to hate them because you disagree over a particular issue, because there's so many other things that you have in common. So, let's focus on the commonalities, and then we can agree that we disagree and still love each other, still have dinner, still, have a drink. We good.
So can you tell us a little bit about your ancestry?
My ancestry is like a lot of African Americans, we don't know a lot. I had one aunt who researched our family tree, but as far as she was able to go back was a runaway slave by the name of Jeremiah Green. That was the first use of the name Green for our family. And he ran away from slavery and married a Native American woman. And so I have Native American in my family. I have African, of course, and then over the years, Scottish and Irish people, and all kind of people are part of my family over the years. So my initial family that I grew up with, my grandparents on my mother's side came from Pennsylvania, and my grandparents and my father came from New Jersey. So they had very different experiences, but my dad and my mom met in Ohio when he was in the Army Air Corps and she was a secretary. And so they decided to make their home in Ohio, and that's where I was born, just south of Cleveland, Warren, Ohio. And then after college, I moved to Los Angeles, where my father had relocated.
Do you think Africans from different parts work well together? We kind of touched on this earlier.
Yeah, I think the possibility is there. We just haven't been trained to work together. We've been manipulated to
work against.
Yeah, and divide, it's because of that divide and conquer mentality. So the things that normally we would be able to work together through, there's always some historical precedents that make people say, oh no, we can't trust them because of this or that. But if they go back in history and see who engineered that, then we'll get to understand why we have these feelings that we do. Again, these are psychological intrusions. They would do things deliberately in order to make us afraid and fear working together. During the times of slavery, they would take the biggest, strongest black man and they would brutalize him in front of the whole slave population to send a message that this is what happens if you stand up too tall, if you have your head up too high, if you talk back, any minor infraction. They would tie him to horses and pull him apart or burn him alive, or all of these things happen to the big, strong black man, just to point out to the rest of the tribe that, hey, don't bother with that. Yeah. And the mothers would teach their children, no, don't do that, because of course, mother's not going to let her lose her children. So she teaches us how to survive. And that's what a lot of African Americans were taught, is how to survive within the system. And Africans in other parts of the world, they had to adopt some of those same strategies. And then, they would use tribes against other tribes in order to, here's some guns, go capture them for us, and here's some trinkets, some baubles, some beads that look shiny and look nice. And, we love nice things and shiny things. Yeah. Black people love that stuff. So they use that against us in a lot of our historical encounters with each other. So, but I still say that what we have in common is more important than our differences. And if we dig beneath the surface, we can find those commonalities rather than dwell on the historical differences.
If this was Europe or America, there would be a public statistics of my next question. Mm-hmm. Currently, what kind of resources does Ethiopia have on the ground from the African diasporas in different parts of Ethiopia?
That's a good question. I think what we have on the ground currently is the manpower and the imagination and the creative spirit. What we don't have, or at least I'm not aware of, is multi-million-dollar and billion-dollar investors. And those are what a lot of those countries actually count. That's what they keep statistics of. But again, the spirit is there. And I think, again, because of the external forces that continually manipulate any unity between us and the continent, that it becomes more difficult for even those who do have millions to invest. They make it more difficult for them. And so many of them feel like, well, it'd be easier for me to go invest here or there or someplace else. I've heard that story many times too. So it's sad but true, but the reality is that in the Rastafarian community, in the diaspora who just love Africa, those who have returned because their family's Ethiopian, or those who have returned because they have that connection to Ethiopia through the Bible or through other historical events. We all have that core love and want to see Ethiopia develop and thrive according to what we feel in our imagination it should be. Because again, everybody has deep down that, you know, if we only get together, look at the marvelous things we can do. And we say that and we think that. So it's a possibility, because if you can't dream it and imagine it, it couldn't be real. So if so many people dream and imagine that possibility, then it's just a matter of trying to work together to manifest those things that so many people have deep inside of them.
Well, we've seen what it means to get together. In the last year, I think we saw.
We were able, because of circumstances.
Exactly.
We were able to get a good look at
what could happen if we did unite.
And it was beautiful.
Absolutely.
Like in Jamaica, in London, in New York, in DC, in LA, there were big movements. And it wasn't just Ethiopian people.
No, it wasn't.
It was black people and white people too, who recognize injustice when they see it, and who recognize propaganda and fake news when they see it. All of those things, all of those free, peace-loving people came together to say, no more.
No more.
You know, hands off Africa. Leave us, let us develop ourselves. Let us do our thing. And I think if that was to really happen, we would do wonders. But again, you know, the agenda is not to let that happen. And that's been going on for a very long time. So this is nothing new.
But we have to keep fighting.
Yeah, the struggle continues.
Exactly, that struggle going.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, what's the best way to make Ethiopians and Africans awesome?
Well, you know, my opinion, we already are awesome. More awesome is just, again, embracing that inner awesomeness.
Right.
You know, don't let anybody tell you you're a second-class citizen, or that you're, you know, we've put up with things here, you know, power outages and water shortages and things like that. But that doesn't make us any less. You know, those are circumstances that we have to overcome. So we have to look at all of these things as, okay, you know, these are hurdles that we have to overcome, not limitations that keep us back. So I think that the potential is there. Even how we're connecting, again, with music, with history, with all of these different things that we're celebrating this month. And for me, it's a year-long thing. I always celebrate Black history. 365 days a year.
365 days. Thank
so,
you, sir.
but, you know, February is important because Carter G. Woodson, who started Negro History Week, deemed it so because Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln were both born in February. Frederick Douglass actually didn't know his birth date, but because he was born a slave, but he celebrated February 14th. So shout out to Fred Douglass.
Yeah.
He was the original first Black president, if a lot of people don't know that. So research, Google Frederick Douglass.
Frederick Douglass.
Yeah.
So what do you think of our driving?
Yeah, again, the driving. If I ever get a car in Ethiopia, I'm going to hire a driver because I don't want the perpetual road rage.
True.
Some people, but that I find, you know, Africa itself, because I was in West Africa and also I've been to Jamaica a few times. And so it's something about, you know, Black people on the road. Sometimes, you know, we're trying to get where we're going. And
pretty fast.
Yeah, you know, we're taught in America, you drive defensively, but here everybody drives offensively. Like I'm first, you know, if I have a bigger car, I'm going first and that type of thing. So again, we could just be nicer to each other. That would be better.
Courtesy, yeah.
Simple courtesy, yeah.
What's the importance of culture As you see, we are very conscious about preserving our culture here in Ethiopia as an African people. Is it similar to the US? Do the Africans there preserve their heritage and culture?
Yeah, they do. Individual families, I believe they do. Like one of my first immersions into the Caribbean culture, I had a friend in high school, and I didn't know that her family was from Trinidad and Tobago until one day she invited me to a party at their house. And when I went in, there's a big Trinidadian flag, and the soca and the calypso music is playing, and the food, the pilau and all of the Trinidadian dishes. And I was like amazed because she lived right around the corner from my uncle's house. And I'd known her like maybe 5-6 years. And I never knew that she was from Trinidad. But inside the house, I mean, the accent came out, everything. So it is, among families, it's preserved. It is. I remember I had an uncle. We used to go to family reunions in Cleveland. And Christmas time, he would get a crate of rum from Trinidad or from one of the islands, you know, like, so there was always these connections that people would connect with their immediate history. Or I grew up, I had a friend whose family was from Alabama, and they would go to Alabama every summer when school was out. The mother would send them to Opelika, Alabama, so they could connect with that part of their family and see the cotton fields and see and listen and see the experience. So it happens, it's there. But a lot of times these things aren't advertised or dramatized. Again, recently they started with Juneteenth. You know, it became a national celebration and things like that. But these are things that African Americans were doing in their family, in their household for years.
For years.
Yeah, so these aren't new things. But,
no, they're not. Okay.
And it's part of our, you know, even the food we eat, everything is part of our culture, our history. So it's just like Ethiopia, but it's different.
As this is African American History Month, I would love for you to tell us a short story about the Black Wall Street, what Black Wall Street was and what happened to it.
Black Wall Street was one of those self-contained communities that sprung up after emancipation during the Reconstruction, like others throughout the country, but Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma specifically, they had banks, they had schools, physicians, they had all the professionals that a modern city needed to run. And people from outside of the community saw how successful this community was becoming. And, you know, when you're successful in your endeavors, you walk a little taller. You keep your head up high, which again, in that time in America, that was not allowed. And, you know, in order to squelch this Reconstruction, this progress that so many black people were making, they felt that they had to create an incident to do some vigilante justice. Again, that word justice, but it wasn't fair justice. It was a mob mentality that just came into the town and burnt it to the ground and killed all of the citizens, women, children. There are a few who survived by, you know, hiding under dead bodies, running. But most of the inhabitants of that thriving community were murdered, and their town was destroyed. And this was repeated throughout the United States, in South Carolina, in other parts of the South. Throughout the United States, this happened. But that's one of the more famous ones because, you know, they've been talking about making a movie about it recently, and so it's on social media, you know, Tulsa and Black Wall Street, because they say Black Wall Street because they had millions of dollars of investment going on, and the black dollar was circulating within that community, and people were becoming very affluent. And some of the people in the white power structure in the surrounding towns, they could not abide that. So they took action against illegal terrorist action, but in those days, those things were just looked the other way.
Yeah. Well, Timothy, I have to tell our audience, besides you being a teacher, you are also an amazing poet.
Thank you very much. You know, I've been sharing some of my poetry on local media and throughout Addis Ababa, but this one recording that I did it was a Black History Month type of idea that I had. My friend and I, Kaya, Steve Swift, production, we put the music together. And then what I did was just read excerpts of 4 of my favorite speeches. One is from St. John in the Bible. The other one is from Marcus Garvey, the great African-American Jamaican leader who came to Harlem and had the largest Pan-African mass movement ever. And Haile Selassie, of course, who spoke before the League of Nations and the United Nations, the only world leader to speak before both houses. So I took excerpts from each one of those speeches, and then also Dr. Martin Luther King's mountaintop speech, his last speech before he was murdered the next day. So I put just excerpts in my own voice and my own reading of those great words, put that to this funky beat, and we call it IC2, the speeches.
Beautiful. We're going to take you to KRS-One, Sound of the Police. So, Timothy, we came here to interview you today, and we would like to actually say thank you for giving us your time, because I know we're actually at your school, so we have taken your time.
I appreciate you coming and seeing us in our environment, see some of the art and and you got to hear the kids. And I enjoy it because even some of the students that aren't my students directly
get
to see and get to understand and get a piece of who I am. Because that's my main thing. I just want to share who I am. I'm an African American who lives in Ethiopia. My ancestral tradition is Ethiopianism, because before Pan Africanism was Ethiopianism.
Yes,
and my great-grandparents were members of Garvey's organization. And so all of those things, I think, make me who I am. I'm standing on the shoulders of my ancestors. My great-grandfather, who was one of Garvey's lieutenants, I feel like he directly is the one who really is happy that I'm here.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for having us, and we thank our audience for being with us. Till next week, greetings.